sound symbolism. So the alleged non-arbitrary mapping between form and meaning in language, right? So we all know this from comic book language, like boom, thwack, whoosh, etc., right? And all of these words, we go, well, it sounds like what it means, right? But they're not super common in English. Well, maybe they're maybe more common than we give them credit for, but they don't sort of dominate our lives, and we almost consider it childish to insert them into maybe like a formal presentation, for instance. Not so in Amazonian languages, and especially not the languages right at that border where I was talking about between the Andes and the Amazon. Language is full of that there, and it evokes almost like the spirit of the forest, the spirit of the world that they inhabit. It's very evocative. And I wanted to, one, try and document some of those, right? So get these on camera. Also, we'll get into that later, but they may be in danger. And one of the reasons to get them on camera is actually to help people reclaim them, right? And be like, oh, yeah, oh, we're about to forget that. Let's, get this on an archive somewhere, a digital archive, an oral archive, because again, things work better orally there. By the way, in our culture too, but that's a discussion for a completely different day. But then two, also, of course, selfishly as a scientist too, I want to know, right? I'm curious, so I want to find out. How do they work? Do they spread? Things like that. We'll get into all of that. So, there are these special words, these, as I was saying, these sound symbolic words. They've been termed idiophones in the literature. So allegedly, words are allegedly arbitrary. You have something like tree. There's nothing t, r, or e like about a tree, right? I mean, it's a tree, right? It's a boom in Dutch and, an árbol in Spanish or whatever, right? Big whoop. But, as I said, there are other words like whoosh and all of this in English even, where you go, well, okay, but the airflow of whoosh sounds like what we're talking about. My favorite example actually comes from Japanese, even though it's Amazonian presentation, is that if you're excited but nervous at the same time, when you're like, I don't know, queuing for a roller coaster or going like on a first date or whatever, going to a horror film, you're both really excited about this thing, but the very thing that you're excited about is also making you nervous. There's a great word for that. Doki doki. You say, doki doki suru. I'm being all doki doki. And you go, okay, well, cool, that's the word for that in Japanese. But why is it the word for that? Doki doki. It mirrors the heartbeat and the type of way your heart would beat during that sensation. So that's my favorite example because I think it's probably the clearest to emphasize it. But many languages are full of them all over the world, as you can see, which I'm not getting into too much, but just to see there's a whole pedigree of people studying this all over the world. And I wanted to go to Ecuador and meet Janice Knuckles, who's an excellent scholar who works on that. So that's what I did. So she works on a language called Quechua, which is a variety of the great Quechuan family, which people might know from, the Incas. That's the language of the Incas, right? I mean, yes and no. But it's this huge language family that exists all over South America, mainly in the Andes, but also in this Amazonian Andean border region, but even in the Amazonian bits. So that's where I went. Met Janice and met the people she works with and, of course, worked on my laptop. But never fear, we can go to our favorite, not Google, and hear that. So this is an example. I hope the audio will work. It's muted if it's not muted. So it's turus, that's that first word. Magic. Nope. Right, so you can see that anyway, so turus, right? And it's the sound, movement, and feeling of eating something crispy, the sound, movement, and feeling of cracking knuckles or finger joints, or sound of a mythic person turning into a tree, which is also interesting, right? That you can almost imagine, right? Someone turning into a tree, and it's almost like the crack of their body as it turns from flesh into wood, right? So those are the instances, like the ecology linguistically of where those words occur, right? And the definition. But you see that it's not like a very short, little one-to-one definition, right? It evokes something. It's evocative language. And so I went and I recorded a few of these, right? So there you go. This one's 2024. Oh, these always updates anyway. So we update this constantly. I started working with Janice on her sort of dictionary, but it's like a living dictionary, which again speaks very much to the orality that Miriam was talking about. Is that it's constantly being updated, new examples are being added, and the entries, are written down, but the primary entry is the video, right? That's what you want to see. Basically I was like, it was like mushroom collecting, but they were idiophones, right? And with the people, and I was like, okay, super interesting. Lots of people say, when languages come into contact, these things disappear and they just go their way, whatever. There's been a lot of discounting of that in much of the way of what Miriam was saying too about Western science and its attitude towards quite a few things. Well, sound effects, right? There's just sound effect words, like in comic books or something. Not important to language, really, right? But to the people who actually speak them, they are. They are important. But people said they disappeared. But we get some cases where, like, people who speak Amazonian Spanish seem to use these types of words, and they come from the indigenous languages too, which is also really nice. So maybe there is some hope, and they don't disappear. But I went to the highlands, to Cotacachi, Ecuador, close to actually where my friend is from, and Isabel. And I said to a person there who ran this Quichua Cultural Center, which is a pleasing thing to say, and I showed him this video of this Quichua speaker here. Her name is Belgica, which means Belgium, and I showed him the video of that, of turus turus and other things like that. He said, I would never use such a word, but this is crazy, but my grandmother would use this word. I've heard my grandmother use such words, and I feel that we have lost these things. And that was where I was like, this could be something more interesting, this could be something bigger. Did the Highlanders have this and the Amazonians preserve it, or does it come from the Amazon? Does it come from being in an environment like the Amazon that's so rich, right? The whole rainforest is around you. Maybe there are more sounds for you to copy. Who knows, right? I mean, people have said such things. So it was an intellectual question, but there's also a pressing community question of, people use these in poetry. Grandmothers use these, when their grandchildren are on their knees. But if the grandchildren aren't using them, when their grandchildren won't have the stories, with these beautiful kind of evocative, poetic sound effects, and deep layers of meaning that come from these words, and it will be lost from the culture. And that would be a shame, and that's what people think. It would be a shame. So we were united in being interested in that and wanting to do something about that. So that's still something long-term I'm hoping to do.